Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. It's Tuesday evening. Right now, President Trump is giving a speech before the joint sessions of Congress. It's March 4th, 2025. Today is day 515. Tonight, on the Pilgrimage to Peace tour, we had a very meaningful time with several dozens of students from a very rural college where many of the students are Christians, just a couple of hours outside of Atlanta, Georgia. The conversation was meaningful as I and students wrestled with hearing about atrocities that have been happening in the Middle East, in Gaza specifically, and in the occupied Palestinian territories in the West Bank over the last 16 plus months. And as we also talked about the massacres that occurred on October 7th in 2023. We talked about what's it mean for us to seek to live out our Christian faith. How do we love better? How do we seek to honor the humanity of all people while not compromising on calling for an end to the violence, while seeking the protection, the security, the safety of all people, and advocating for liberation and end to occupation, self-determination, that people could live freely with hope and purpose for a future. It was a challenging night, but it was good. It was beautiful. One student, with the greatest degree of sincerity, asked the question and said, shouldn't we focus less on politics and just more on Jesus? And I said, I hate politics. I was called to be a pastor. And we talked about how politics literally just is about people, and that if we really want to share the love of Christ, and if we want to be faithful to our call as Christians and to live out our faith, that we cannot ignore politics, that politics determine where weapons are sold and how weapons are used. And they literally determine life or death, when wars will be fought and how wars might be ended. And so if we want to share the gospel and good news in the world, then we cannot ignore politics. And so maybe we should start by supporting political solutions that oppose war and violence and death and destruction. And that is one of the ways that we can be witnesses to the good news of the gospel of Christ. Tomorrow, I'll give an update about Trump's address tonight before Congress. But in the meantime, here is just some summaries of the news from the past 24 hours. I apologize, I did not have very much time to organize this, so it might be a bit of a disarray, but this is from various different news sources of what's happened in the Middle East today on this 515th day, March 4th, 2025. Israeli troops have demolished houses and cleared a roadway through the occupied West Bank's Ner Shams refugee camps. This is leading to the displacement of almost 13,000 people, according to the head of the camp service committee. You'll recall that already about 40,000 people have been displaced since the beginning of the year, and that is a report by Reuters. Hamas accused Israel of trying to collapse the Gaza ceasefire agreement, with an official saying that Netanyahu's attempt to extend the first phase of the deal was a blatant attempt to avoid entering into negotiations around the second phase, with an envisaged an Israeli withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. You'll recall that the Israeli Defense Forces did withdraw from the Netzarim corridor, but not from the Philadelphia corridor on the border with Egypt. Netanyahu's office said yesterday that it is imposing a blockade on Gaza, which already existed. So that just means tightening the blockade, because Hamas would not accept a plan which it claimed had been put forward by the U.S. Special Envoy Witkoff to extend phase one of the ceasefire and to continue to release the hostages. Egypt and Qatar, who both have been key mediators in the conflict, were among the Arab states that said Israel's decision violated the ceasefire deal. The Egypt Foreign Ministry accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon against the Palestinian people. Israel also had been accused of violating internationally with the Turkish Foreign Ministry, saying that its decision to block aid aims to collectively punish the Palestinian people of Gaza. Foreign ministers from several Arab countries have met behind closed doors in Cairo ahead of the critical Arab League summit. I believe that began today, or maybe it's beginning tomorrow. It'll focus on alternatives to Donald Trump's proposal for the effective ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people from Gaza. Reuters saw an Egyptian plan that will be presented as an alternative to Trump's takeover proposal. It would purportedly sideline Hamas, and it would be replaced with interim bodies controlled by Arab, Muslim, and Western states. Israeli forces killed at least 2 people in Rafah in the last 24 hours, and 3 others were wounded in Khan Yunis overnight in the Gaza Strip, according to medics. This raises fears that the ceasefire is collapsing altogether. Israeli military said it fired at suspects who posed a threat. Separately, a Palestinian official allied with Hamas said that a state of alert had been declared among fighters, according to Reuters. The prices of all essential goods in Gaza have risen in response to the imposition of further blockade on the entry of all goods and humanitarian assistance into the Gaza territory, the New York Times reported. And Egypt's proposal for rebuilding Gaza, as I just mentioned, would sideline Hamas and would replace them with interim bodies. So we do know that Cairo is set to present its vision for the territory's future during the Arab League summit. So that did begin today. In Syria, Israeli forces yesterday struck a site in northwest Syria where arms belonging to the previous Syrian government were stored. So the Assad regime had weapons stored that was struck by Israeli forces yesterday, according to the Israeli military. According to the Syrian state news agency, the strikes did not cause casualties. On the college front, Harvard has been receiving some pushback for hiring Brett McGurk, who was announced on February 10th as a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. He was the Biden administration's top Middle East official and its number 3 person who backed the Israel war in Gaza. According to Harrison Mann, who we have spent time getting to know, Harrison Mann was one of the Biden officials who resigned and quit the Department of Defense because of his opposition of the Gaza war. He says that McGurk was far from functionary when it came to following orders. He was an enthusiastic, this is according to Harrison Mann, again, who was one of the Biden administration officials who quit because he opposed the Gaza war. So Mann says that Brett McGurk was an enthusiastic and influential advocate for the U.S. military and the support that sustained Israel's brutal campaign in Gaza, even after the White House became fully aware of the civilian death toll. When colleagues in the administration raised concerns about the civilian casualties, according to The Atlantic, quote, McGurk would push back against the complaints, invoking his stint overseeing the siege of Mosul during the Obama administration, end quote. Apparently considering an operation that flattened much of the city and killed over 9,000 Iraqi civilians, a model for success. So that is in regard to McGurk being hired at Harvard as a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. If you want to hear something hopeful, I'd encourage you, on the other hand, to watch the acceptance speech of the film of the year at the Oscars, No Other Land. This is a portrait of a West Bank village under Israeli military occupation. It won the Oscar for the Best Documentary Feature at the 97th Academy Awards. This was on Sunday. I watched a video of this shortly after the live occurrence, and I was moved to tears. This is what peace between Israelis and Palestinians look like. In their acceptance speech, 2 of the film's 4 directors pleaded for an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They said, "We call on the world to take serious actions to stop the injustice and stop the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people." That was Adra, a Palestinian journalist and activist. He said, "About 2 months ago, I became a father, and my hope to my daughter is that she will not have to live the same life I'm living now. No other land reflects the harsh reality that we've been enduring for many decades and still resist," said the co-director, Basel Adra, a Palestinian activist from Masafer Yatta. Masafer Yatta is in the South Hebron Hills, a region of the West Bank. Adra went on to describe the issues about his village, including home demolitions and displacement. He said, "We call on the world to take serious actions." And his counterpart, Yuval Abraham, is an Israeli investigative journalist who also co-directed No Other Land. And he described Adra as his brother, and he said that they're considered unequal. He talked about how we made this film as Palestinians and Israelis because together our voices are stronger. We see each other. The destruction of Gaza and its people, which must end. The Israeli hostages brutally taken on October 7th must be freed. He continued. So this is the Israeli director speaking. He says, "We live in a regime where I am free under civilian law, but Basel is under military law that destroys his life." Abraham called for an end to the violence that has consumed the Middle East for decades and worsened after Hamas's terrorist attacks. "We made this film, Palestinians and Israelis, because together our voices are stronger," Abraham said. "We see each other. The atrocious destruction of Gaza and its people must end." I really, really, really would encourage you both to watch the film, but even just the acceptance speech that you can find on YouTube of receiving the Oscar. It's deeply, deeply moving. And finally, last night on the Pilgrimage to Peace tour, we had a meeting at a Quaker meeting house with many people involved in peace building and advocacy in the Atlanta area. Some of the organizers of the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage who've been meeting faithfully, walking in a multi-faith context once a month. And one of the participants shared these words as an encouragement, which I wanted to leave you with. "Take heed, dear friends, of the promptings of love and truth in your hearts. Trust them as leadings from God, whose light shows us our darkness and leads us to new life." That's a Quaker advice inquiry number 1, and it has relevance regarding the things that we've been talking about. So thank you for your ongoing efforts. Be encouraged that the light goes before us and will guide our path. In the name of Christ, amen.